What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and it's time for another video. Everyone liked the last one, so here's 5 more sleeper OP builds for the beginning of the new year. Happy New Year's Eve, everyone, for the time of my recording. For many of you, it's already going to be 2022, but we've got some champions for you to play. Now, this is, of course, after the 11.24b micro patch, which had a couple of nerfs. This is also accounting for what's going to be changing in 12.1 in the new year, so I mostly avoided champions and runes that are being touched and items that are being touched in that patch. Let's get into it. First things first, with the top laner, who has not played very much, but is very, very strong, which is top lane Trundle. Now, oftentimes, I'm trying to pick champions who not only are winning a bunch of games, but also have good matchups into currently popular champions, and this is one of them. He is good into fighter melee champions like Aurelia, Yone, Set. You can even go a little bit more down the line like Mordekaiser and Dr. Mundo. Darius, Yasuo, all those champions are good matchups for him. He out lethal tempos Aurelia, and he can out stat check someone like Set and Yone and Yasuo, and just fight them is going to work pretty well overall. He is an early game bully, as you can see, generally speaking, as tends to happen for side lane fighters. He falls off over time. I have a theory this is somewhat because it's very hard to split push well in solo queue. Trundle would be pretty much no exception here, but generally speaking, he is more of a split pusher than a team fighter, though he can go either way with it. As far as weak matchups, though, yes, of course, weak to ranged champions. He's also weak to champions whose combat pattern beats him, right? This is a lethal tempo user. He wants to take longer fights, but if it's a short trade, like Singed walking up, flinging, and walking with Poison Trail, Pillar's usually not enough to make that trade come back in and win the rest of it. Camille's going to stun and backflip and walk away. Jax and Shen are going to put on long duration dodges. You can't stack lethal tempo. They're getting damage without you doing anything back because all of Trundle's damage is auto attack based, so there are some bad matchups for him. But again, you can choose later on to split push versus team fight based on how the game is going. Here's his build: Ignite Flash, Ignite TP, even Ghost Flash. All those works. You can run, Darius runes and just fight you for a living. Again, he is a lethal tempo user, is not much of a surprise. He is there to stat check you, lock you into the fight, and deal damage in battle. Presence of Mind actually solves his mana issues. Triumph is not quite as needed. You already get a Triumph proc functionally via the champion pass. You don't really need to go for more than that, but you will run out of mana when you're fighting back and forth in top lane. You want to scrap constantly. Presence of Mind will help that one quite a lot. Legend Tenacity also, by the way, more important than Legend Alacrity. We're going to have attack speed in the build as well as attack speed through the W, so getting out of stuns is continually more important than we kind of think. Last Stand just makes sense. Again, we're scrapping pretty constantly. This is the most consistent improved damage we can get. By comparison, Coup de Grace requires the enemy champ to be below 40% health before it does a single thing, which means if you're fighting full to dead, you do not have a rune until the back half of the fight, whereas Last Stand turns on when you're at 60%. That's much earlier on. You have a rune much sooner, and the actual damage it deals gets higher as we're both down to 30%. My damage dealt is higher than that of Coup de Grace. It's a pretty easy choice. One thing we are seeing players do incorrectly, though, is run Demolish. That is not important. Demolish is there for champions who don't already have good turret damage. If Trundle has a lone time with your turret, he's killing it anyway. If he doesn't get to attack the turret, it's not going to matter regardless. Keep in mind, Demolish takes 5 seconds to ramp up, and then you pop the turret, and then you get damage. Trundle can't sit there in Demolish range and wait around letting Teemo hit him or whatever and then hit the turret. He's going to take the turret or he's not, and in that case Demolish is not really changing the calculus very much, so run runes that actually do things like Conditioning, a bunch of bonus armor and MR, and Unflinching, which is again more tenacity, which is very, very good. Your offensive choices are all pretty close. Attack damage versus attack speed is pretty close. Flex getting attack damage versus armor or MR based matchup is close, and the defense slot scaling versus instant stats is pretty close, so make a judgment for what you think your lane's going to look like and go from there. As far as the actual build and skill order, again, you are optimizing for damage as soon as possible. So QWQ is going to be how that one happens. You do want to put the points in there. Once you're level 7, you can choose between Q max and W max. Yes, that means you're getting rank 5 W by level 10 instead of level 9, but that's fine. You want just enough baseline Q value. But it's actually pretty close. W gives you more movement speed, gives you more attack speed. It can be better overall scrapping. Just keep it in mind. But of course, you're leaving Pillar for the last rank up. I want to point out, though, that for any lethal tempo user, your combat pattern is going to reinforce Trinity Force far better than Divine Sunderer. If you're playing longer fights, Trinity Force is much, 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 much better. It's a lot more attack damage. It is a lot more attack speed. The Sheen proc itself is more damage against virtually all targets for a long portion of the game. It is far more damage and far more useful in cases where you are a damage dealer. If your goal is to kill someone, which if you're picking top Trundle, it is, Trinity Force is the better item for that. It helps you scrap against those champions. Just making sure everyone's aware of that one, that's what's important. As far as boot options are concerned, Merc Treads, Ninja Tabby, or Steel Caps, and Berserker Greaves are actually all competitive options. Obviously, Berserker Greaves are the most aggressive option. Our second item is always Titanic Hydra. We're always going for the wave clear option because we need it. It gives us the ability to punish a roam. If you're playing dedicated side lane, you need to get on the enemy turret as soon as possible. Every extra second you spend clearing the waves, extra second you're not killing a turret. This is how you knock this stuff down. It's very good dueling damage in the first place. It's a very strong item. I recommend you go for it. Then we make a choice. If we're going for team fights, we go into Sterix. Sterix shield scales based on the number of enemies that you have hit you, so it is not that good in a 1v1. It's okay, but it doesn't scale that hard. Hullbreaker is a much better 1v1 item. It's a ton of armor and magic resist, and again, it buffs your waves, so you can kind of get some stuff down there. Ruin King, a decent dueling option as well. Fimbulwinter, I want to point out that it works for slows for melee champions. This means your Q and your E both count for Fimbulwinter. It basically means that every other or every third Q is going to give you the Fimbulwinter shield. This is very, very good. Now, slotting in tier into your build can be tough. If you're, do you finish Trinity Force, then buy a tier, then buy your Hullbreaker, then go Fimbulwinter? I'm not sure how you're supposed to do it, but Fimbulwinter is a very, very strong option. It is a lot of durability, and it's going to be pretty valuable overall, so keep that one in mind. Death Stance, another strong offensive-defensive split option for fighting an Aurelia or another physical damage champion in a side lane, or just tanking because there's a strong AD carry in the team fight. All right, next up, we have Jungle Rammus. He is a scaling tank pick. He's definitely a pretty strong champion overall. And of course, unsurprisingly, he is good versus attack damage teams. If they're AD heavy, he's going to look really good. Keep in mind, though, there's some AD top laners who do true damage or come with innate armor pen, like Garen and Darius. They actually work pretty well against him because they can just assassinate you at, maybe 1/3 health through their ultimates, and that could be really scary. Obviously, mages can look really rough. Amumu, Lilia, and Zac, those are all rough. Trundle's going to hurt. Like, there are some bad matchups, but again, against AD heavy team, looks really good. Also, Rammus is exceptional against assassins, and assassins of all flavors, because assassins have to get into melee range, they have to jump onto someone, and you can just play peel for them. There's a thing I want to point out here, which is the team with more tanks wants low variance fights. If your team has Rammus or Leona or whatever, and their team has, call it Janna or whatever, and let me think of like a reasonable, like Wukong as like a fighter. The team with the tanks, aka the Rammus, wants to play the game just frontline to frontline. You want to play low variance. You're not looking to dive. You're looking to say, hey, you have a Wukong, we have a Rammus. I live far longer than Wukong does. So as long as Wukong doesn't kill Ashe in the backline or Kog'Maw in the backline, he's dying way before I'm dying. So I am happy to just taunt a Garen, taunt a Darius, taunt a Wukong, and just kill frontline. If you are a tank and they don't have one, do not do anything flashy. Just sit there and be like, hey, I'm peeling. Because I can sit here with W on and just like walk forwards, and my AD carries behind me, my Azir behind me, my KCP behind me. We're going to kill you guys before I die. I don't have to do anything here. I just have to have a ball of stats and we're good. And that's the gameplay pattern. Now, if they have a Zed, if they have a Lissandra, if they have someone trying to dive backline and wreak havoc to create the chaos, it's your job to prevent the chaos. You're going to play a little bit closer to your backline champions. And again, you sit there with ball curl on, doing whatever. And when you see Zed's shadow come across, you walk back, you flash taunt him, and Zed dies. And now Zed's dead. He did 200 damage to Ashe, and it's a 5v4, and you're still frontlining. And that is how you want to play team fights as a tank. If your team has more tanks, you want to play low variance. You're waiting for assassins. You are taunting people who are actually threatening the backline, but you are not trying to dive in and finish, diving the backline Kaisa because you do not care. You don't have to do that. You can play low variance. All right. Next up, The setup for Rammus. Now, basically, everyone has made the right choice rune-wise. The common Rammus page is the best Rammus page. Turns out Legend Alacrity is actually quite good on him because he really kind of needs the jungle clear speed. You're seeing he's kind of stacking attack speed through stat shards as well as Legend Alacrity. The one big surprise, though, is Ghost is better. One thing we are doing a lot of in this build is actually trying to stack slow resist, because we would love to move at full speed during defensive ball curl, which is a 30% slow attached, and we can break a lot of that down by stacking move speed in other places and actually getting through it. So Ghost is really worthwhile. I heavily recommend it. By going for Ghost, we don't have to go for Chem Tank, and we can go for a stronger Mythic, which is Sunfire, Aegis, and of course Blue Smite. Unsurprisingly, we are starting with Ball Curl. It is correct, by the way, to learn Q at level 2, even though Frenzying Taunt gives you some attack speed, which is some extra damage. It's like, I want to say 25% attack speed for maybe 8 seconds because of the Ball Curl. That's something. It's there. It has some value, but Q is going to do far more damage. It's going to let you pop Raptors or Krugs or whatever. Q to your next camp, get there faster as well. At the end of the day, right, every jungler always gets level 3 before doing anything else anyway. So the fastest to 3 is always the optimal skill order, which is W, then Q, then learning Taunt. Waiting until 4 to get Taunt is going to be wrong, so W, Q, then E. A weirdly large number of Rammus players are skilling him incorrectly. He's got a deflated win rate from bad skill orders. It is Powerball first and Taunt second. By the time we're into real team fights where longer duration taunts truly matter, we're going to have enough ranks in Taunt by that point later in time. It's going to be all right. But the points in Powerball means a lot. It's extra damage to the camps. It's extra movement speed when we're ganking. It's lower cooldowns for the better ganks. It's just the right ability to max. So get in there. Again, Blue Smite for movement speed. We're stacking slow resist. So Swifties is actually the optimal boot option. Obviously, there's a lot of cases where you want to go Steel Cats because he scales off of armor and you're picking it into AD heavy teams, and that all makes sense. And I get that. However, Swifties are really, 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 really good. It is not hard for someone to, at some point, seeing Rammus, throw a skill shot at him, throw a Mal's E, do whatever, auto attack, do something, shoot an Ash volley, and you've turned off Mobies, you've slowed the ball curl down, and they're going to walk away from you in a lot of cases. But if you have Swifties, you don't get the bonus move speed turned off by being in combat. You don't lose out on a lot of stuff, and just getting to the enemy champions is really valuable. Being able to walk away during ball curl to like kite out at 25% health because they're chasing you, and if you turn off ball curl, you die right away. If you don't turn off ball curl, you're too slow. Both. So it's Swifties is really, really good is what I'm saying. Do not underrate Swifties. They're a very good option on this champion. And we're skewing very, very slightly toward damage. Again, Sunfire Aegis is going to be more damage, but we take long duration fights, right? We're getting the Powerball knockout with the Powerball slow. Then the taunt. We've got the ulti slow. We've got a lot going on here. We have time to ramp up Sunfire Aegis. Deadman's Plate is actually our best second item option. It is better. It is more performant than Thornmail. It is overall very strong because, hey, it's move speed and a burst of damage. We actually are skewing damage away. Sunfire Aegis, again, the later Thornmail, our MR option being Abyssal Mask, the Deadman's Plate. These are very, very useful things that we're going to get a lot of value out of to catapult into the enemy champions. We're still getting move speed out of Blue Smite, move speed out of Ghost, move speed out of Swifties, and move speed out of Deadman's Plate, but we can skip the Chem Tank and go for a more well-rounded build. It's going to work pretty well. And that's going to be the look. As far as the final item option, if you are going to stack up late towards armor, either Warden's Mail pickup is good. You can go Frozen Heart or Randuin's. They're pretty comparable, so kind of make your own choice with that one. But one thing to point out is Warmogs is a pretty perennially underrated item. It's very strong, worth picking up, and you should be looking for it. Next up is mid Kayle, another one on the anti-assassin bent. Vex, Katarina, Akali, and Zed are all great matchups for Kayle. She loves playing those champions or against those champions. Also, she's really good against late game telegraph champions, meaning, okay, I'm coming. All right, here comes the damage. Get ready. And she just ults the target. Vladimir with his ulti. Makes a lot of sense. Malzahar ults your teammate. You ult them back. Lissandra comes in to dive your backline. You ult them back. Zoe lands asleep on someone. You ult them and they survive the paddle star. This is what you're looking at here. Kayle is good against a wide variety of very annoying champions. Keep her in your champ pool. She's really good against a lot of things. I mean, this is the who's who of champions people hate, right? These are probably 6 of the top 15 most banned champions. Kayle. Kayle's the answer. She's very good against them. Of course, she's weak to pre-6 stun. She's weak to control mages. There are some tough matchups. Victor and Pantheon are good examples of this, ones who can kind of punish her before she can ult and whatnot. As a quick aside about Zed, even though Zed's ultimate stores pre-mitigation damage, meaning if you are ulted and Zed ults you and he punches your ult shield, that damage will store, and 20 to, I think it's what, 25, 40, 55%, I think is the number, something like that. some percentage of that damage will still get stored, right? And it will pop at the end of the Zed ulti. However, it is still mathematically correct to block all his normal autos, his normal abilities, his normal Qs, and just take the 40% damage amp pop at the end. That's never going to one-shot you. Zed does not put in 5,000 damage so that the 40% plus 1 AD pops you at the end. That's never going to happen. So just ult when his ult lands and fight him. He can't do anything. You're going to be okay. It's going to work out great. As far as playstyle is concerned, as you can see, she scales really aggressively. Do not get suckered into team fights early game and prioritize getting your gold and XP above everything else. Yes, your team has to play around that. Yes, it's going to be frustrating for some players, but if you want to win the game overall, if you want to be the change that helps people realize, oh, if we just stop being apes and just like wait for Kayle to scale, we can win the game. Get to side lanes. It's why TP is actually a decent option for her, and get your scaling on. Couple thoughts going on. Press the attack is better than lethal tempo. Essentially, Kayle does not really require more attack speed. She's got a ton through her passive. She gets a bunch through Berserker's Greaves and Nashor's Tooth. She's going to have a lot of attack speed already through runes and whatnot. She doesn't need to go even more with lethal tempo. Keep in mind, Kayle's time to kill is actually very short. Her actual damage on hit is incredibly high for an attack speed champion. If you compare to someone like even AP Twitch or a Kog'Maw or whatnot, like Kog'Maw really wants to fight you for like 8 seconds and get the full lethal tempo thing going and use the entire W. Kayle kills you in like 5 auto attacks. Kayle will finish the kill late game before she has fully stacked lethal tempo. So press the attack and she fits her combat pattern much better of getting 3 autos in, doing an E-burst later on. It's going to look a lot better. So number 1 is go press the attack. You can go fleet footwork in really bad matches, but I do not recommend it. It is possible, like the win rate's not bad, but in general, press the attack is going to fit your pattern pretty well. Overheal versus Triumph is pretty close, but Overheal seems to be more performant. You can just kind of get a little bit more health overall, which is useful. Last Stand / Coup de Grace can be pretty good options as well. Coup de Grace will turn on around the time, and EXP is going to be good. It's going to turn on around the time that Press the Attack is popped. But Last Stand works pretty well for a champion who, you're probably going to, get dropped a little bit, and then you're going to self-ult at half HP once they started hitting you, and then you can kind of fight back under the ulti, and you're going to get a lot more damage on that one, and maybe they die during the vulnerability. There's actually something there for the combat pattern. As far as the rest of the runes are considered, once again, conditioning is being underrated on a lot of these sort of ranged champions, squishy champions, the ones who are trying to get dove because people are trying to go after them. Conditioning is very good. Now, I know she's already natively good against assassins, but just getting a bunch of free armor and MR is already very good. Keep in mind, in general, with Kayle, she has relatively high health and low armor and MR. She has 26 armor and 26 magic resist at level 1, and the scaling isn't very high in either one of those, so she actually needs flat additive armor and MR more than she needs flat additive health. And keep in mind, she buys Riftmaker and she gets Omnivamp, so she has other sources of plus health, so she could really use plus armor plus MR or other things that aren't just raw plus health, which means conditioning is better than bone plating because bone plating is functionally raw health, and conditioning is armor MR, which multiplies the health that she already has, which is actually reasonably high. And unflinching is better than overgrowth because overgrowth, though it does eventually give percent HP, which by the way, as a stat, is defense tool agnostic. Percent HP doesn't care if you have health or armor, but it gives flat HP, which she doesn't need because she already has flat HP. So unflinching for the tenacity to get out of the stun, so you can self-ult, so you can live, is the better look overall. So that's the better rune setup here. Everything else makes a lot of sense. Obviously, pick the defensive shard you need when it's going to be relevant. As far as her skill order and item build is concerned, of course, we are likely Emax. You can Qmax. This is mostly a top lane thing when she's against a lot of melee champions, but Qmax versus melee makes sense. We're always going to max the heal last. The ranking's not that important on it. And so here's the consideration, right? If we're going to put if we're at like a level 9 Kayle and we're considering, okay, what is rank 2 versus 5Q and what is rank 2 versus 5E? It's 15 on hit damage, and it's a 32 versus 50% slow. So the 15 on hit damage, of course, matters a lot. There's other stuff going on like cooldowns and a little bit of missing health damage that goes on or whatever, but like the primary consideration here is I have way more consistent damage on one hand or I have a way bigger slow on the other. Again, yes, Q is a damage rank and whatnot. Now, these are pretty close together in terms of power levels, okay? But you want to kind of think about it. Which way do I really want to go with this one? Is there a reason to go for QX versus Emax? Do I need to kite? Do I need to lock someone down so I can stick to them for a little bit longer? What's the thing going on here? Am I always stuck with short trades? Am I always trying to like run away from the Camille or something? Or, lock her down after her E combo comes in? We got to find out. And so that's a real thought to have. One thing that people are doing wrong with item builds is that they are going Zhonya's far too often. You do not need Zhonya's This is not a strength you need to double up upon. You've already got your ultimate. If you could, oh crap, they're coming for me in Zhonya's, you can oh crap and self-ult. They have the exact same functionality, except that you can now attack during your ultimate, whereas you can't attack during Zhonya's, and you don't really need more. You are giving up a lot to buy a Zhonya's Hourglass. As a ranged champion, you don't tend to need 45 armor. You're not going to get that much out of it in most cases, so why not build a better item, such as a Lichbane, such as a Death Cap, such as a Cosmic Drive, or a Rylaze, or a Banshee's Veil. Now, Banshee's is useful because it'll actually just block the stun outright. When Mal's Flash ults you, you have a Banshee's Veil, and nothing happens. When Pantheon goes to flash stun you, and it was too late to ult or Zhonya's, the stun was blocked. Banshee's has a far more synergistic defensive pattern with Kayle than Zhonya's does. Zhonya's does what the ult already does. Banshee's allows you to ult. It's a really, really big difference, and I'm shocked when people buy Zhonya's, even on mid-Kayle, when Banshee's is clearly a better option. So keep that one in mind overall. As far as your item considerations at the very start, obviously you've got some wiggle room here. You can kind of go for a greedy option like Cole. Nash's First is always the right option. Berserker's Reuse is always the right option for boots. Riftmaker is always the right option for item number 2. And then you make your choices from there. Deathcap is quite good, of course. Lichbane's quite good, of course. It has movement speed on it, which is very valuable. It's good to get some of that stat going on. Sort of final set of thoughts is that Magic Pen is not a very good stat on her. Doesn't need Sork Shoes, doesn't need Void Staff, just because she's still mostly magic damage, but it's not 95%, like a hard mage like a Zoe or an Orianna would be. So you're getting diminished value out of Magic Pen, whereas you're getting full value out of things like raw ability power because they're affecting all of her scalings. Next up is bot lane Kog'Maw. Contrary to popular opinion, he actually doesn't appear to be that much of a scaling pick. Now, I want to be clear about this graph, though. Kog'Maw is not a terribly popular champion, and the very first and very last data points have really, really low sample size. If you compare the 15 to 20 minute mark here to the 35 to 40 mark right here, we're looking at 52 to 52.5% win rate. It's honestly pretty flat. Don't let this really bait you. Kog'Maw is not very popular, and this is only going to be like 4% of his games, and so this is going to be a lot of variance. I mean, it could be down here at, 48%, it could be up here at 54. So just keep in mind that he is relatively flat, but it's worth pointing out that he does have a decent early game because it turns out he's got more range than other AD carries and actually deals pretty good damage overall. But yeah, ranking up E at the very end isn't the most useful thing. So, there's an argument to be made that he really doesn't have the best late game, but again, he's not super popular, so data is going to be a little inconclusive for things like this. He's overall relatively flat. But let's talk about what's going on with this champion, okay? AD carry matchups often don't matter, especially for more mid-range picks like Kog'Maw, where if he's against a long-range champion like a Caitlyn or an Aphelios in the early game, well, you can press W and match that range. Some champs are a little bit tough, like Vayne can kind of dodge around, she can kind of queue off the slow, and she can kind of duel him. That's going to be tough for Kog to win, but that's not the important part of bot lane. The more important part of bot lane, the higher variance part of bot lane, is the support matchups. He is weak to poke supports. He doesn't have any innate movement speed tools, doesn't have any innate sustain tools, doesn't have any innate ways of getting away from the poke. So, he's going to get whittled down by a Xerath or a Vel'Koz or something pretty reliably. But he's, of course, good into tanks. Even though they would like to all in him, Kog'Maw has decent early game durability, and overall, you can just kind of play well around it, use some enchanter help or whatnot, have your teammate support for you, and he's going to burn down a tank really fast, right? If he's not instantly dead, it's going to look pretty good. And again, unpopular champion, so again, a bit of low sample on some of the choices here. However, here is the setup. A lot of these, of course, it makes sense. First of all, Flash plus Exhaust. Exhaust is very underrated, though it is finally getting some traction here in bot lane. You really want to run Exhaust in bot lane in the 1v1. It is massively better than heal in the 1v1. Supports roam out of bot lane. It happens. They go and do stuff. Sometimes the jungler shows up to 1v1 you. Sometimes the mid laner shows up to 1v1 you. Sometimes the AD carry Tristana jumps on you and tries to, rocket jump full combo you and take that fight. Exhaust is hugely beneficial for that. Taking 1/3 less damage is the same thing as having 50% more health. Heal does not give you 800 HP, but Exhaust does. And so really, really keep that in mind. Barrier is of some value as well. It can be decent against Exhaust, especially if you can't get in range for Exhaust, if you're, going to get, Victor combo from far away, if Malzahar's trying to hit you and okay, yes, you're suppressed during the spell, but now you're going to run with Malefic Visions on you. it's already too late for exhaust, so you hit barrier and you block the E damage. Heal can be okay, cleanse can be okay, but you're looking at exhaust and barrier for the really bursty self durability. Next up, Triumph is better than Presence of Mind. I know a lot of Kog'Maws feel like they have mana issues. That's too bad. Triumph is still going to be overall a bit stronger. So you're probably looking to go that way instead. Legend Bloodline versus Alacrity is close. However, in this case, in the rune page I'm suggesting here in this video, I'm going to suggest you definitely go for Legend Bloodline. I want to point out how Lifesteal works. So first of all, Omni Vamp works on everything. So if you have a Doran's Blade, it's going to work on everything. But the actual stat of Lifesteal works on your auto attack damage and on-hit damage from items. Now, not on-hit damage from skills, so his W does not lifesteal. It will Omni-Vamp from Doran's Blade, but it will not lifesteal. But a Blade of the Ruin King, a Wit's End, a Kraken Slayer, a Rage Blade, those things will lifesteal. And so you can kind of get away with running Bloodline and no other sources of Vamp, which is what I'm suggesting here. Cut down for the other options is pretty close. Keep that one in mind. You can go any way you want to go with it, but cut down obviously can be quite good if you're not going to stack a bunch of health. And then we get into the second half of the rune page. Now, there are three really close sets. You can go Sorcery, Domination, and Resolve Secondary. They're all pretty close. I am going to suggest we do Conditioning and Unflinching or Overgrowth here. Generally speaking, don't go Overgrowth alongside Cut Down because you're going to grow your health pool, and that's kind of troll. But Conditioning, Unflinching, again, gives you that burst of armor and MR to let you go Shield Bow and be a lot tankier. One thing I'm seeing a lot with Kog'Maw, such to the point where I think his most common fourth item is actually Randuin's, and I think his second most common first item is Wit's End. People are going for tanky builds on Kog'Maw. The thing is, you can go for tanky builds by just running the Resolve tree and running runes like this, and then going more offensive in your items, which we will see in a second, and is the recommended build here. But Resolve Secondary is really, really strong and is getting really underrated. But you can go for Taste of Blood or Eyeball Collector or Evidence Hunter, pick two of the three. You can go Nullifying Orb or Absolute Focus or Gathering Storm, pick two of the three, and those are all decent options. But again, I really recommend going here and picking greedier items instead. As far as the ability order is concerned, WQW, EW, the little bit of a slow you get off of rank 1E is just not that important, but Q is really front-loaded in attack speed. It's really, 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 really front-loaded. And also, you're not trying to be a mage in lane anyway. W has a mana cost. It got added back a few years back. It was free for a short time. So you have to be a little bit judicious about your mana pool, because again, we're running Triumphs to the Presence of Mind, which I still want to say is the right choice for him. But we're maxing W as soon as possible, and we are maxing Q second. Again, rank 1 Q early on gives you really good trading. Very few champions can deal as much sustained damage as level 2 Kog'Maw with QW. Even without the Q giving shred, just the attack speed, it's very, very, very good. As I said before, Kog'Maw is not very popular, so there's only so much data for each of these builds, but it appears that Dagger plus Potions is some tech you really want to consider, especially with the build that we're going for, which is Rageblade first item. Rushing Rageblade is substantially Kog'Maw's highest win rate first item build. It beats every other option. It even beats mythics, even greedy mythics, pure damage mythics like Gale Force and Kraken Slayer. Rageblade gives you 1/3 more on hit effects, which by the way means that when you've maxed your W by level 9, you're getting 1/3 more damage out of your W. That is a lot. It means that this item itself, the Rageblade by itself, has something like 53 on hit damage. On average. That is a large amount of on-hit damage. That is about as much AD as you're getting out of Kraken Slayer or Gale Force in the first place. Plus, this item has 45% attack speed, which is far more than any of the AD carry mythics. So it is easily his best early damage item, because all we're trying to do is scale Kog'Maw W. That is all the heavy lifting in the early game before we get any other stats online. Of course, Berserker Degrees make a lot of sense, and the rest of the tech is Hurricane second. Hurricane only gives you 40% of your total attack damage on the attacks, but guess what? We're getting full value out of on-hit effects. This allows us to have Wave Clear, by the way, that for two very cheap items, this totally costs 5,200 gold for Rageblade plus Hurricane. That is incredibly cheap. That is the fastest 2-item spike you can realistically get on any champion in the game. You are going to be the first to spike. Your on-hit damage is going to be baseline 80? Plus 1/3, so we're looking at over 100 on hit damage on auto attack, plus the W damage, and it's on 3 people. We've got wave clear, we've got team fight damage, we are rolling in DPS, and we are going to power spike so fast with Rageblade Hurricane, it's going to feel great. At that point, now we can go more defensive. We can go for a shield bow option third, and now that we have 2 mythics online, it's going to give us 100 health, it's going to give us 10 AD, we're going to have a more scaled shield that more levels have come on. Now I know shield bow is getting nerfed in the next patch, but that's okay. the first 2 items are going to carry us for a lot of the way, and we can consider maybe Gale Force is actually better down the line as a comparative option to Shield Bow. And yeah, there's going to be a nerf that's going to hurt a little bit, but we have really, really strong power even without Shield Bow. Then we can go for a more offensive option like Phantom Dancer. We can go for kind of tankier options like Titanic Hydra. Keep in mind, if we are going for an Overgrowth build, we can go Overgrowth, Shield Bow, Titanic Hydra, get a decent amount of plus health in that one. It can look okay. We can even try to take the Scaling Health rune, and we have a little bit of this kind of Bruiser option going on here, because keep in mind, the percent health into on-hit damage, that is an on-hit effect, so it's an on-hit item. So you can get a little bit of something there with Kog'Maw. Wit's End is getting nerfed next patch as well, so Shield Bow Wit's builds are going down quite a bit, but Wit's End is one of his best MR options for late game. Material Scimitar can make a lot of sense if you are getting, flash ulted by Lissandra or flash ulted by Malzahar, you can QSS and get out. Guardian Angel is a reasonable defensive option here where, the Zed jumps you and you've only got so much you can do here, but okay, we pop the passive, we pop the GA, we keep fighting. It's an okay armor item. It's kind of up to you at this point. However, there is a Dark Tech build that I want to completely recommend here. It's first item Mythic. It is second item, pay attention here. Second item is Hurricane or Phantom Dancer. It's either or, pick whichever one you want. And third item, Navori Quick Blades. This is probably the single best build here, much like we had Locket Senate in the previous video. Navori Quick Blades, third Kog'Maw. Now, it takes the 3 items to get there, and we're buying a big Mythic, we're buying an expensive item here, right? This is 6,800 plus another 26. This is a lot of money, right? This is a 10,000 gold build. However, if we get there, if we get to our 10,000 gold build, we have permanent W. The cooldown is 17 seconds, and the duration is 8 seconds, and the cooldown starts when you press the button. It doesn't start when the effect ends, which means if we can bring 9 seconds back, some of that is through ability haste. There's 30% on Quick Blades. So that's going to be through the, percent of remaining cooldown is refreshed on crit. I tested against some target dummies. Now, yeah, a lot of champions in the real world are going to move around a bit. It's going to be a little bit harder, but there was a lot of time to spare. There were several seconds to spare at this point in time. At 6% crit, at 3 items, every 10 autos is a new W. So you can have some downtime here. You can have some downtime where, they ran away, I have to catch up and do whatever, but you can get back in there. You can get back and keep hitting, and you have permanent W. Now, I want to point out, Hurricane's bolts, as far as I can tell from my testing, do not trigger Quick Blade. It is only your primary target, but your primary target does not need to be a champion. You can just sit there, autoing some minions, get your crits off, and have W back in case something went weird. Permanent W Kog'Maw is really, 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 really strong. And again, if they see, he pressed W, and they go and disengage, and they try to wait out your W, you can go to a wave, you can go to Dragon, you can hit it a couple of times, crit, and then be ready to go sooner than they expect. It's a very strong build. It's a really good possibility. Keep it in mind. Now, I want to point out, though, this is mutually exclusive with the Rageblade build. You've got to choose very early on which build you're going for, because if you build Rageblade, of course, you do not crit, which means you cannot go Quick Blades. So keep that in mind. You aren't allowed to do both these builds. You got to choose at the very start of the game, but if you can get to 3 items, this is a very, very strong build. And finally, we have support Taliyah as an option. She is quite good against enchanters and mid-range champs. If she's at the same range as you, she's going to do a ton of burst, and you're probably going to die. Enchanters tend to be pretty squishy. It's going to look pretty good. However, she does not have the same range as a poke mage, so a Xerath is going to look pretty good against her. And she's pretty weak to tanks where they're going to play behind minions. They have to, dodge the WE combo, sure, but they can't get Q poked, and then, when Thresh Flash Flay hooks you, you've just kind of died from full health because you don't have any innate durability and you have no innate escapes, and shoving the Thresh back is not going to be enough. But she's incredibly strong early game. She falls off as time goes on later on. However, we can stave off this decay by building more appropriately because people have not really figured out proper support builds for a lot of champions, so we can kind of, if you're watching this video, get a bit of a leg up on late game champions. So first off, we're doing some pretty standard things. We're running Ignite Flash, running Dark Harvest. Taste of Blood for his cheap shot is a call. Taste of Blood appears to be slightly better. If you're not into a hard tank matchup, you are going to take some poke back, and so getting some health back is actually pretty valuable. You kind of already have a one-shot angle in terms of landing your W. Keep in mind, you can only cheap shot if your W or E lands to impair them in some way. Q poke is not going to trigger cheap shot, so Taste of Blood is going to much more reliably give you health differences. Ghost Portal also is much better than the alternatives. Any Sightstone champion who's in Domination should probably be going Ghost Portal, especially ones who actually scale off AD and AP because it's actually a good stat for them. Ghost Portal is outstanding. It's extra vision. It means that when you go and deep ward the red buff and your ward times out, you get a Poro to keep seeing red buff vision. You're going to get, extra ability power from that happening. It's very strong. Really, really recommend you take it. It's a great rune. Also, Ingenious Hunter, it does affect passives on items. That's going to affect Luden's Tempest. I am pretty sure that should affect Crown of the Shattered Queen. It's going to affect your sweeper cooldown. It's quite valuable. Just take it. It's good. Make that one happen. And then the other bit of rune tech people aren't doing is people are going sorcery secondary when they should be going precision secondary. Presence of Mind is going to give you mana regen just like Mana Flow Band will, and it's going to work just fine. And then instead of water walking for the roaming speed, we're going coup de grace as our option for more damage. And this way we keep the mana. We still have roaming tools because of our passive, because of our ultimate. We don't need to go for more of that one. We're not really doing that much walking otherwise, because again, we're ulting across lanes, or we're hugging walls and getting move speed that way. So we don't really need to go for the other options like Relentless Hunter and things like that. And we have coup de grace because we are trying to assassinate, right? We are trying to one-shot, WE, land the Q, and you're going to get a bunch of bonus damage as they are low. Obviously, your defensive shard of armor versus MR is whatever you want, and double AP makes a lot of sense here as well. As far as the item build's concerned, pretty standard stuff. Crown of the Shattered Queen appears to be a stronger option than Luden's Tempest. Keep in mind, Luden's has an anti-synergy with the way her kit works. If you're going for a WEQ combo, if there were any minions at all, your E is going to tag a minion, proc Luden's on the minion, and deal splash damage to the minion. So you're losing out on a lot of Luden's Tempest's power. All it's giving you is flat pen at that point, and honestly, why not just get 400 more gold, go for Crown, have some gameplay against an all-in tank, against a Zed jumping you, against a Kiana jumping you, survive that, have your bonus AP, get your extra damage that way, and move on to your next items a little bit sooner. Crown appears to be a stronger option than Luden's, even after the Crown nerfs from 1124. Again, as far as skill is concerned, W at level 2 is pretty obvious. E is a pretty worthless skill by itself. We are learning E at 3 because you want the WE combo. That's really, really important. Of course, we're maxing Q first. The E max second is going to be pretty reliable for a bit of extra damage. W max is not that important overall. And finally, a quick thought about support itemization. You always have your Sightstone from your, Spell Thieves. You always have Boots. You always have your Mythic option. So those are 3 items you're always buying, right? And yeah, you have choice on Mythic, right? There is some choice here, but you're always having those 3 items. And then, as a mage support, you should always get a Death Cap. As a support, you should always get a Ward Stone, so you can hold your control wards, and that means you only have 1 item slot left. And that item slot is whatever item you are buying second. Because you're going to buy Ward Stone at level 13, you're buying Death Cap last, which means you are always just going Shadow Flare. The math works out very aggressively that Shadow Flare is the correct option. People have done a lot of math saying, oh, well, in a lot of these cases, you're getting way more pen out of Void Staff than you're getting pen out of Shadow Flare, and that might be true. However, we are trying to optimize early game power. We are trying to deal true damage to our opponents, and if we don't have a Luden's Tempest, we are not going to overcap our pen very easily. Keep in mind that a full stack Shadow Flare and Sork Shoes is 38 magic pen. That is exactly the magic pen of a squishy. That is literally an Ash with a stat shard is 38 MR. So that is a number that we are happy to target and go for the flat pen build that way. I agree that we shouldn't be building 3 flat pen items. Luden's Shadow Flare Sork Shoes is going to be too much in most cases, but our goal is to one-shot a squishy and crush the early game and crush the mid game with a 2-item spike, so we're going Shadow Flare. For 200 more gold, we get 30 more ability power, we get 200 health, which isn't too bad, and we get overall better pen against the targets we want to kill, so Shadow Flare is our option. Then we just move on to getting Death Cap and getting Wardstone, and our build is spoken for. Sadly, there aren't a lot of choices here with Taliyah. That's the video. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next year. Bye-bye.